What's good? It's Fevir. We're going to be looking at the beastly two-handed Frost Death Knight PvE information, rotation, glyphs, stats, the works. Currently, two-handed Frost is simming better than dual wield, finally, and until we're fully raid geared, it's going to stay that way, so enjoy those large obliterates while you can. Stat-wise, obviously strength, but for secondaries we want to go multi-strike to versatility to mastery to haste to critical strike. Glyph-wise, we don't have much going on in terms of added DPS. There have been some things that can be dark simmed, so getting the dark sim glyph could potentially boost damage. But aside from that, the removal of the taunt on the Army of the Dead and Death Grip on those glyphs could be good, paired with maybe an AMS and an Icebound Fortitude glyph to soak up more damage from more runic power from AMS, and a lower cooldown on your stun break. Talent-wise, only talking about DPS increasing talents. Tier 1, it's Plague Leech. Tier 3, Death Advance. Tier 4, and this is kind of a toss-up, Runic Empowerment is the pick, but Blood Tap is a marginal, and I really want to stress that, a marginal DPS increase, but with a higher chance to mess up. So even for advanced players, and for myself, I recommend Runic Empowerment unless Pooling Burst is super stressed for an encounter. And Tier 7, Defile, no questions. Now you'll be fighting in Frost Presence with the Rune of the Fallen Crusader engraved in your weapon, and the rotation, or rather the priority system, kind of goes as follows. Number 1, if in execute range, or they will be in 5 seconds, cast Soul Reaper. Number 2, cast Defile if you know the target will remain stationary for the duration. Number 3, keep up and refresh your diseases. And an aside, if you're using Plague Leech, and you should, the easiest way to utilize this is to eat the diseases when you have Outbreak active, so that you can boom, eat the diseases, and then refresh them instantly with Outbreak. And then from here is when we sort of get into a resource seesaw, but to keep the priority system for reference, number 4 is spend your runes, preventing them from capping with Obliterate. Number 5, spend your runic power, preventing that from capping with Frost Strike. And then number 6, use Howling Blast when you have a Rime proc active. And that's it in a nutshell. But as I alluded to, steps 4, 5, and 6 are quite different. These steps are about managing your resources and reacting to procs, because as you cast Obliterates, you build runic power, and as you cast Frost Strike, time elapses refreshing your runes. So you are trying to use both abilities evenly without wasting any recharge time or earned runic power while reacting to the 2 or 3 procs the spec have. Those procs are Killing Machine. This is procced by auto attacks, and it guarantees the next Obliterate or Frost Strike is a crit. You should prioritize using this on an Obliterate if you have both an Obliterate and a Frost Strike able to be used, but it's almost never worth it to wait for the runes to recharge if you could just go ahead and Frost Strike with it. And this is because holding the buff prevents other auto attacks from proccing it again, and Killing Machine doesn't stack. So getting this buff means use one of those 2 strikes now. But on the other end, if you have Obliterate runes but no Killing Machine proc, and you have, 4 or 5 seconds until your runes refresh into being capped, you can wait to use that initial Obliterate in hopes of scoring a Killing Machine proc down the line. But you don't need to do this. It's a very marginal DPS increase. It's just choosing where you want to spend your time waiting in your rotation. Second proc is Rime. This is procced by casting Obliterates, and it gives you a free empowered Howling Blast cast, and this should just be cast before using another Obliterate, just very straightforward. Number 3, and this is the if you decided to choose Runic Empowerment instead of the active Blood Tap, but most people, you should be using Runic Empowerment. When you cast Runic Power, so off of Frost Strikes, this can instantly refresh a rune, and this may require you to Obliterate immediately after to prevent capping your runes out. The entire rotation is very start-stop. As you maintain your diseases and your Defile, you cast Obliterate and you cast Frost Shock, and after every single cast, you take a second and gauge what has procced and what's the status of my runes and runic power to decide what to cast next. And this may seem way more complicated than it is, but just try the spec out for like 3 minutes. It's got a really nice feeling to it. You're just spending your time not wasting resources or procs. Multi-target, depending on the amount of mobs, usually over 5 or 6, you might just chain cast Howling Blasts, or depending on your mastery level, Blood Boil, but usually it's less than 5 or 6 mobs, and because of that, and because of the empowered Rime proc damage on Howling Blast, you just do the normal rotation. You don't want to skimp on those Obliterates. If you do get a Killing Blow, however, you do get a free Death Strike proc named, I think it's Dark Sucker or Dark Sucker, and that can be used in any of the downtime. It's just free damage. Cooldown wise, Pillar of Frost is a 20-second, 25% strength buff on a 1-minute cooldown, so 33% uptime. Use this on cooldown unless you know that you won't have uptime on the boss. Army of the Dead is a once per fight cooldown. It's no longer channeled, so you can use this as a pre-pull to save the rune cost as you're in the fight, but you can also use this during burst phases, bloodlust casts, whatever. Empowered Rune Weapon is a 1 or 2 time per fight cooldown, and because of its strength, I like to think of this as a stars-aligned cooldown, waiting for the overlap of your Rune of the Fallen Crusader to overlap with the Trinket proc, to overlap with the Pillar of Frost is best, and you can burn through those gained resources so fast that the overlap window doesn't have to be huge. It's one of those things where you can wait all fight for that perfect moment, or, you know, for the stars to align. But again, fight specific, burst windows, or when enemies have debuffs, etc. Just use your head on cooldown usage. And that's really it. This was a really long-winded summary. Hopefully it was helpful. This is one of my favorite specs in the game, period. Until next time, this is Fevir. Perf.